Well, welcome to our new series, everyone, called Ancient Mesopotamia, Portrait of a Dead Civilization, an overview of A. Leo Oppenheim's book. In this series, we're going to be talking about Mesopotamia. So this week, we're going to start with Mesopotamia, Assyriology. What is this stuff? We're going to look at the literary stream of tradition, texts about day-to-day activities, and finally, royal inscriptions. Essentially, today we're going to talk about what Mesopotamia is, what Assyriology is, and the basics of cuneiform culture, what cuneiform texts existed in Mesopotamia, and how do they break down by general category. I promise it will be exciting. So what in the world is Mesopotamia? What is Assyriology? The purpose of this book is to introduce you to this dead civilization. And so he begins by answering these basic questions. Mesopotamia is Greek for the land between the rivers, which refers to the land that exists between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, modern Iraq and Syria, parts of Syria anyway, eastern Syria. The writing that was known from this region in antiquity was called cuneiform, wedge-shaped writing, and it was impressed on clay with a reed stylus. And we have a number of videos, introductory videos that you can look at that Megan has put together to talk about cuneiform writing, what tablets look like. And so I won't go back over those things here. You can find them on Digital Hammurabi on the YouTube channel. Oh, Megan says linked in the description. See, this is why she's good at this stuff. Early in cuneiform research in the 19th century, when people were beginning to decipher cuneiform and understand it, the language was known as Assyrian. Later, it was determined that there was an Assyrian and a Babylonian dialect of Akkadian. The language is called Akkadian. However, Assyrian stuck, and it became the basis for the name of the discipline, Assyriology. So it's the study of the Assyrian language. But more broadly today, Assyriology focuses on the languages and the culture of ancient Mesopotamia, which is primarily Sumerian and Akkadian. So cuneiform was used. It's a syllabic script. It was primarily a syllabic script. Later it became used to write alphabetic scripts. But it's been used to write many languages, including Akkadian, Sumerian, Hittite, Old Persian, Ugaritic, etc. Assyriology proper, though, focuses primarily on Akkadian and Sumerian, the languages of ancient Mesopotamia. So cuneiform, this wedge-shaped writing, is found in Mesopotamia on many materials, many media, but two significant media are monuments and clay tablets. So when you think about ancient Mesopotamia, you think about cuneiform, oftentimes you think about these very impressive monuments, these statues, these reliefs that have cuneiform on them. In reality, though, much more important are the clay tablets, and we're going to talk about primarily those today. So Oppenheim divides these texts, the texts that are found on the clay tablets, into two primary categories. He calls them the stream of tradition and the day-to-day activities. So let's talk about them. The stream of tradition basically encompasses the literary texts. Now, it's a very broad term, and so we'll get into more of the specifics. It is the realm of the scribes. So the scribes are the ones that transmitted this information, and interestingly enough, they were copied as part of their scribal training. And we see this in particular during the Old Babylonian period, so the early part of the second millennium. And it was used as part of their scribal training to teach them the Sumerian and Akkadian languages, and also, we know, to indoctrinate them. We can talk about that later. Now, a significant source of, albeit later, cuneiform culture, evidence of cuneiform language in Akkadian and Sumerian is Ashurbanipal's library from the 7th century. I put this library in quotation marks, but this is a collection of texts that Ashurbanipal the king gathered from all over Mesopotamia. And it included such texts as omens. Omens are single-line entries, often about an act or an event or a physical feature of an animal, a human, astral bodies, etc. And these entries, these omens, contain a predictive formula, and it allowed the gods to speak to humanity through the omen itself, and we'll get into them later in some more detail. Lexical lists are these long lists, often in columns, vertical columns, that contain lists of signs, vocabulary. You even see things like lists of different grammatical forms. There are lots of things that lexical lists can contain, and they're integral to Mesopotamian culture. Incantations and prayers. We see epic literature, which of course is the most common, the thing that's most widely known, I think, about Mesopotamian literature. We also have fables, and for some reason I've put prayers there again. Proverbs is what I meant there. Sorry. I typed prayers. If you've been watching the textual criticism, this is my eye skipping and duplicating. So this is a form of deutography. I'm writing something twice. I meant to write Proverbs. Sorry. And finally, catalogs. So catalogs were used to take inventory of what was there, perhaps on the shelf or in the collection. These are the different parts of the stream of tradition. Now, there was some standardization. You might hear the word canonization, often put in quotation marks. This standardization showed, as time went by, people, when scribes copied these texts, they copied them in a standardized form. Now, some of these texts became standardized very early. For example, lexical lists began to standardize much earlier. Some texts became more standardized later. So, for example, the laments. Laments had some standardized forms early in the second millennium, but became much more standardized in the first millennium. So, now we've looked at the texts that were in the realm of the scribes. Now we turn to the texts that were part of day-to-day activities that still involved the scribes in some cases, but also could involve, more common people. So, for example, we have records of administrative transactions. So we have sales receipts, we have rentals, loans, marriage contracts, wills, etc. We have all of these documents. These genres, these types of documents are very common in the ancient Near East, in Mesopotamia. But we also have letters, and letters between many different individuals. For example, regular people could write letters to one another. We see this, for example, in the Old Assyrian period, merchants writing to one another. We can see high-ranking officials writing. We see kings writing to one another. For example, during the Amarna period, kings writing back and forth letters to one another. And we even see kings writing to deities. So one could write to a deity. So all kinds of letters existed in ancient Mesopotamia. One final genre of text that we need to look at are the royal inscriptions. Now, these were not meant to convey information to the general public. As a matter of fact, they were usually buried in the foundation, either of a temple or a palace. These were communications between the king and the god very often. If you'd like more information, you can see Megan's daily data linked in the description, on royal inscriptions. It's an excellent video. Okay, that's a good basic introduction to what Mesopotamia was in very broad strokes and what Assyriology consists of. What is it the study of? It's a study of ancient Mesopotamia, its languages and culture, and the basic breakdown of the different genres very generally of cuneiform texts that were written in Akkadian and Sumerian. Coming up, we're going to begin to look at an introduction more specifically to ancient Mesopotamia. We're going to look at the land, the surrounding regions, all the interesting basic information pertaining to Mesopotamia. So, until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?